Shalom, y'all, as we say in this part of the world. Welcome to the virtual tour, Discovering the Northern Border. My name is Gadi Ben-Dov. I'm a tour guide. I usually am out walking around with people in Israel, showing this wonderful country. And today we're going to be going virtually to an area that unfortunately in the past year has been quite a bit in the news. Apparently in a battle, sort of a battle zone. A lot of the people that are living along the border have been evacuated and live in areas that are farther back. And the areas that we're going to go to are actually closed today, so they're not accessible, which is why we're here doing a virtual visit, because we want to remember and not talk specifically about what's going on in the past year or so, but rather understand the beauty, the culture, the people, the area, and hope for better days when we can come back and visit this beautiful part of the country. So without further ado, let's start our tour of the northern border of Israel, focusing on the border to the north with Lebanon. So I'm going to use Google Earth as a way to sort of give us the topography of everything. And if you see, we're zooming in from Israel in general to the area of the north of Israel, where cities like Haifa and Nahariya, we have Tzfat, other places that are along the border. Haifa is about 30 kilometers from the border. That's about 20 miles. And we're going to be in areas that are literally 0 to 10 miles from the border, places like Kiryat Shmona, Metula. To the east, we have the Golan Heights, with the capital of the Golan Heights, the city of Katzrin, also in the news lately, but we're going to focus on the area of the Finger of the Galilee. Take a look at this, what we call the panhandle of the Galilee, or the Finger of the Galilee, Etzba HaGalil. Here we have an important area of Israel, which we'll talk about soon, because the water sources of the Jordan River are in this area. We're going to talk about Metula specifically, the town that is literally on the border. As you can see, that solid white line that's following all along is the border between Israel and Lebanon. And aside from the Finger of the Galilee on the east side, we're also going to go to the west a bit, where the area of the Chula Valley, which is the Finger of the Galilee area, goes into the Upper Galilee Hills, or mountains we call them. And you can see the border keeps going westward towards the Mediterranean, and we'll be visiting and talking about that area as well, which we refer to as the Western Galilee. But the Western Galilee is technically part of the Upper Galilee as well. We'll be in Rosh Hanikra and in other parts. So where is the Upper Galilee, and why is it important from ancient times? We want to understand the history and the place that this area takes in our history. And I want to mention a road known as the Via Maris, or the Road of the Sea, which is essentially the purple road that you see following along the Mediterranean coast. It connects between two superpowers of the ancient times. You have Egypt and the Nile River in the bottom left-hand corner of your of the map, and connecting to Mesopotamia between the two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. And I'm talking about Iraq of today, and many different cultures were there, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and so on. And the land of Canaan, where the land of Israel is today, was always the land bridge between these two connecting superpowers, as we say. And the Via Maris goes along the Mediterranean, cuts through the Jezreel Valley, and up the Jordan River Valley, and essentially gets to the road to Damascus, which we'll talk about as well very soon. Moving forward in modern times, the borders of Israel and Lebanon are established not in 1948 when the State of Israel is established, but rather decades before that, at the end of World War I. The Sykes-Picot Agreement, the British and the French defeat the Ottomans in the battle in World War I. The Ottoman Empire loses its hold of the region, and the superpowers of the time, including the Russians and the Americans, by the way, realized that this area of Iraq of today, that's in pink over here, has something very important for the modern world, and that is oil. There's a rush to take over these areas, and in the Sykes-Picot Agreement, the Brits and the French divide. You can see Area B under the influence of the British, which includes the area of Israel of today, or as it's called at that point, Palestine. Notice that there's an orange color, which is the Jerusalem and to the north, which is basically the holy sites and the important sites for the Christian world that remains international in this agreement. And Area A in the blue is under French control, and essentially the border between the British mandate and the French mandate is what determines the borders of Israel later on when it's established. Moving forward in time after World War II, there's an agreement or a resolution of the United Nations of a partition plan that decides to divide Palestine into two pieces. The orange that you see on your map is going to be an Arab state, and alongside it a Jewish state. These are the words of the resolution, is the blue. And the blue that you see is supposed to be the Jewish state. And notice in the north of Israel that we have this area. You can see the word acre very big over here. All of this area is the upper Galilee of today with a large Muslim population. And the Jews are supposed to get the Galilee panhandle, or this area in blue, which was very important for the Zionist movement and for the Jewish state to be, because it has in it the tributaries of the Jordan River, which feed the Sea of Galilee, the Kinneret, which is the main source of water for the newly found state of Israel. So the borders established here, as you can see where Lebanon is, and Syria all the way up here, that border is established in the partition plan according to where the French used to be, Lebanon and Syria, and where the British used to be, which is referred to as Palestine. Today, when we look at a map of Israel and Lebanon, we see that the border is really not using any kind of geographical natural borders. That's common in many borders between countries. And if you look at the map that I'm showing here, you can see the right below the word Lebanon, you can see the Litani River, the light blue over here, which flows from north to south along the Jordan River, along the Bekaa Valley, which is part of the Syrian African Rift, starting in Syria, going all the way down to the Red Sea in Africa. And at some point, it gets to what we call the knee of the Litani, Berech HaLitani, and it does literally a 90-degree turn and starts flowing down to the west to the Mediterranean. In many eras during this ancient times in this region, we had the border established by the Litani River, mainly because it's difficult to pass the river, easy to defend if you're defending against other empires, and that would have been the natural place where the border would have been. But as we discussed earlier, because of issues between the French and the British trying to establish themselves after World War I, the creation of the League of Nations, the predecessor to the United Nations, was established, and as a result, the border moves farther south, and the British, thankfully, insisted on keeping the finger of the Galilee, or the panhandle, which we can see over here on the right-hand side, very important for later on for the state of Israel as well, because of the water. Bottom line is the border today between Israel and Lebanon goes along a ridge of mountains, nothing to do with the geography essentially. If we look at a schematic division of the Galilee, the upper Galilee is the area along the border. Here's the border with Lebanon. Lower Galilee, the difference between them is in elevation. The lower Galilee about 400 meters above sea level. The upper Galilee about 800 meters above sea level. That's 1,200 feet. Lower Galilee about 2,400 feet upper Galilee. And you'll see there's another part here which we call the Western Galilee, which technically, in terms of the upper lower, is part of the upper Galilee, and the city of Nahariya, Akko, part of this Western Galilee along the coastline. We're going to visit a place right at the corner of the border between Israel and Lebanon, all the way here at the end, known as the Ladder of Tyre, or Sulam Tzor. And it's called that way because it goes all the way down into the Mediterranean. And the reason it's called the ladder is because Alexander the Great, 332 BCE, before the Common Era, while trying to conquer this region, runs in along the coast of the Mediterranean into this ridge of mountain that goes directly into the Mediterranean, impassable for his armies. He carves a ladder or stairs into the other side of the ladder of the ridge of Tyre, and that's why we still call it today Sulam Tzor. This picture is actually a view from my kibbutz. I grew up in the north of Israel, kibbutz Gesher Haziv. We always saw this mountain. I remember as a kid thinking, what's on the other side of that mountain? What can we see if we go on the other side of that mountain? When I joined the Israeli IDF, the Israeli army, I was actually stationed for a few months on this ridge and finally saw what was on the other side. But at the end of this ridge going into the Mediterranean is the beautiful grottos of Rosh Hanikra. Literally, the translation is the head or the top of the grottos in Hebrew. Amazing, beautiful colors as you go through some of the caves. In modern times, there's a cable car that was established to bring it down. And if you look at the picture on the left, you can see there's buoys in the water. See these buoys? In recent times, in the last, I'd say a decade, Israel literally marks the border in the water to prevent any kind of infiltrations of fishermen that are coming in, probably mostly Hezbollah operatives, but the border today is marked even a couple of miles into the water. Let's watch a video of the grottos and the cable car. It'll give us a better idea of what this looks like. So as we're traveling up towards literally the end of Israel, beautiful view of the coastline. My kibbutz was actually in that view before. And we go to the cable car. The cable car takes 2 seconds. I think it's about a 30-second ride. Very steep, one of the steepest in the world, about 60-degree angle coming down. Beautiful views as you come down through the cable car. And literally what we're looking at now is the border, the ridge coming down into the water. That's the border. The other side of this ridge that we see here is Lebanon. So we're literally at the end. I have to say that when this was filmed, courtesy of my colleague David Hyman, who's a tour guide as well, as I mentioned, these areas are not accessible nowadays, so I had to use previous footage. And what is amazing is you see how calm and clear the water is. I've lived near these grottos and have been here probably dozens of times. And I always thought it was amazing to see it when it's calm, like now, or to see it when there's a storm. And the difference is incredible. Now it's quiet and the water is calm. If you come when there's a big storm, you hear the crash of the waves. Incredibly powerful. These grottos are carved out of the chalk. Essentially, chalk is limestone, very soft. Millions of years of these waves crashing into these limestone eventually create these beautiful grottos. And 3 kilometers from Rosh Hanikra, about 2 miles from the border, is kibbutz Gesher Haziv, where I grew up. I moved from the United States to Israel when I was a baby, 6 months old, and spent all of my childhood in this beautiful place. As I mentioned before, seeing the beautiful views. On the other hand, also living in this beautiful area of the Western Galilee, as we mentioned here. And now we'll move farther along the border with Lebanon to the Galilee Panhandle, which is, again, essentially part of the Upper Galilee, but unlike the 800-meter average, 2,300 feet average of the Upper Galilee Mountains, the Galilee Panhandle is, for the most part, in the Jordan River Valley, also known as the Syrian African Rift, starting all the way in Syria, going through the Bekaa Valley in Lebanon, meeting the border with Israel, Sea of Galilee, all the way down the Jordan River Valley, and eventually to the Dead Sea, and from there down to the Red Sea and meets in Africa. So when we talk about the region in terms of topography, this is a topographical map that I think is important for us to understand the difference in the heights. So the Western Galilee, where we were just visiting before, the green on a topographical map means low, and the brown means high. So you can see the Upper Galilee Mountains, relatively high. Mount Meron, the highest mountain, 1,208 meters. That's about 3,600 feet. As we say in Israel, ze lo big deal, not a big deal. It snows, but not enough for skiing and stuff like that. And now we're going to the Panhandle. This area over here, which is also green because it's considered to be the Chula Valley, part of the Syrian African rifts that continues up here. And you can see the ridge of Mount Hermon, the highest ridge in the area. Israel controls a very small part of it, way up 2,300 meters above sea level, about 7,000 feet. There we have some ski slopes and some very cool area that we can go skiing. My wife is an avid skier. She always says that the slopes in Mount Hermon are not that exciting. She used to ski in Denver and the Colorado area, Vail, all those places. So it's understandable. But Israelis go crazy in the winter to go to Mount Hermon for the snow. You can also see here the Via Maris, the road, the ancient road that I talked about, coming along the coastline. There's some breaks in the Carmel Ridge where people would cross through and then go through the Jezreel Valley and Beit Shean Valley, meet up with the Syrian African Rift, also known as the Jordan River Valley, go up to the north, past the Sea of Galilee from the west or from the east, doesn't really matter, and then all the way up to the end of the valley up here by the border with Lebanon. Because the road continued, instead of north, it continued to the east. And what would happen here is from here they would climb up to the Golan Heights and eventually Damascus, and then on to Aleppo, and from Aleppo down to the Euphrates and down to the area of Mesopotamia. So this is a good map to also understand that. The reason I mentioned the road to Damascus is because a very important highlight of this area, and that is a story about Saul of Tarsus, Shaul miTarsus. Saul later on is turned into Paul, and Saul of Tarsus, or Saint Paul, is persecuting Jesus and his disciples. He's the bad guy in the story. On the road to Damascus, literally climbing up to the Golan Heights, he gets struck by lightning, falls off his horse, probably hits his head and has a concussion. When he wakes up, he starts realizing that Jesus is the true Messiah, according to the Christian tradition. And from this point on becomes, instead of the persecutor, the guy who's literally hunting down Jesus and his disciples, turns into their biggest promoter. He becomes the marketer of the Christian, of this new religion. And the road to Damascus, very important to note over there. Another guy who probably walked on this Via Maris, this old road, coming from Damascus to the land of Canaan and later on to where he lived in a town called Beersheba in the south of Israel, is a guy named Abraham, Abi Baby as we know him. And Abraham walked through here as well. It's actually mentioned, this site that we're in now, Tel Dan, is mentioned in the Bible as a place that Abraham was in. And one of the most amazing archaeological finds in Israel is what we're looking at. We're looking at a gate to the city. See, there's an arch here. The arch was filled in with mud over here. We don't know why it was filled in. This was found in excavations done in the 1990s by Professor Avraham Biram of HUC. And we don't know why this gate stopped functioning. It was filled up, covered up, which is great for us because this gate is between 4,000 and 5,000 years ago, built with mud adobe bricks, which is why it's covered, protected from the rain once it was exposed. And whether or not Abraham actually went through here is an interesting question. Possibly. He actually visited Dan. Whether he came through this gate or not, that's an interesting question, but we call it the Abraham Gate just as much. Another very cool thing that we find in Tel Dan is a ritual center of King Jeroboam of Israel, the first king of the divided kingdom. After Solomon dies, the kingdom is divided into two, and King Jeroboam builds a cultic center, a ritual center in Dan. You can see an altar over here on the left picture, as well as a high place, a bima, where possibly a temple was built. And finally, the most important thing that was found in Tel Dan, again by Professor Avraham Biram, was this stele, essentially a stone sign that was erected at the entrance to the city of Laish, or Dan, depending. The Israelites called it Dan, the local Canaanites called it Laish. And on this stele, the king of Laish mentions all of his conquests and all of the people that he was able to beat. And here it actually says Levet David, the house of David. He defeated a king from the house of David. Let's watch a video that shows us Tel Dan. And Tel Dan is famous not only for the archaeology, which of course I love because I'm a tour guide and I think it's very cool. Most Israelis know Tel Dan as a place of one of the tributaries of the Jordan River. Lots of water, incredible vegetation and nature, absolutely gorgeous. So let's watch the video. So look at all this water. Seeing this flow of water, you'd think that Israel doesn't have water problems and that water is not a scarce commodity. Dan is one of the three tributaries of the Jordan. And here we are at this cultic site. It actually says in Kings 1, chapter 12, that after seeking advice, the king made 2 golden calves. He said to the people, "It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt." One he set up in Bet-El, which you believe is Ramallah of today, and the other in Dan. And this became a sin, and the people came to worship the one in Bet-El and went as far as Dan to worship the other one. So here we can see the beautiful excavations that were done here. And you can see the altar. Perhaps we don't know if this is in fact the height it was, but this is an educated guess. And in another courtyard behind this altar is the bima that I was talking about before, the elevated area with beautifully carved stones. You can see they're much nicer and much more effort was included here, and perhaps a temple stood on this stage where the Holy of Holies of the temple would have been. Now, this is an incredible find because it essentially shows the first Reformed temple of the time. This is a temple that was recreated with the model of the temple in Jerusalem, and recreated because access to Jerusalem was not allowed after the division after King Solomon. Now take a look at this beautiful area over here. You can see this is the courtyard of the entrance to the town, Sha'ar Ha'ir, the gates of the city. And the Bible references to many different cities, how the business center of the city was never inside the city. The locals would not allow people from around the countryside to come into the city for fear of being attacked. And all of the markets and the trade, including the court, where the king would sit in judgment in different things, was always done outside of the city in this courtyard area. And here we see the area of where the king would have sat. Notice that it's not in the middle. In fact, you can see these four sort of cup holders for the legs of the chair. And the king would be in the corner with his back to a wall because he was always worried that someone would come up behind him and stab him. That was not something that would be a good idea. And a canopy that perhaps was covering the king. And this all takes place in the center of this courtyard. These are the gates to the city. One of the most important finds at the gates of the city is the stele that we talked about earlier. This is a picture, of course, with the words Yoash Levet David, the conquest of the king of Laish, says that he beat and defeated a king from the house of David. Why is this so important? Because this is the only place outside of the Bible that the name David is mentioned. There's a lot of controversy in archaeology and in the world whether or not David really existed. And this is a very important archaeological find because it mentions King David outside of the biblical story. Very close, also on the border with Lebanon, is the city of Banias. Now, Banias is a derivative from Arabic. Because in Arabic the letter P is not pronounced, there's no P sound. So Panias, the city of Pan, became Banias. And what am I talking about when I talk about Pan? Pan is the god that is the god of hedonism, the god of having a good time and not worrying about what'll happen in the future. And there's lots of water over here, beautiful waterfalls. The Banias is also one of the tributaries of the Jordan River. And throughout history, we're talking about from the Greeks, later on the Romans, Banias was such a lush and beautiful area that it was literally called the city of Pan. Pan is also a god that used to roam around in the woods in very lush areas like the area of the Banias, and he would scare people. He would literally scare them to death, which is where the word panika comes from today. Panic comes from the boo, the scaring that Pan used to do, and that's why the area is called Banias, the city of Pan. We're actually going to see in this next video what this beautiful area looks like, including some of the areas you can see Mount Hermon up above, and the water sources. Again, the spring is right here in this in these caves over here is where the spring comes out of the hills. The water from the snows in Mount Hermon that melt every summer flow down, seep into the ground. We've actually tested. They put some dye in the water that was in the snows of the Hermon that appeared after a few months down here in the springs of the Banias. So incredible amounts of water, It provides a third of the water of the Jordan River. And the area has some beautiful temples from the Greek time period. You can see these niches are where they would put some statues of the gods. This one specifically, here's the god Pan, and all of these other niches for smaller gods. And this whole area right by the cave where the water used to come out is an important site where the Greeks and later on the Romans would have their area. Now, very important to note that this area is also where there were sacrifices made to the god Pan. In the Christian Bible, this place is referred to as the gates of hell, literally, because there was an open pit, the cave where the water flowed from, and that's where they would throw in the animal sacrifices as a sacrifice to the gods. So Jesus and the disciples in the Christian Bible come to this city, the gates of hell, to start the journey of Jesus to Jerusalem, his final journey to the cross. And Banias, or the city of Pan, also known as Caesarea Philippi, is the way it's called during the time of Second Temple period, the time of Jesus, and that's in the Banias as well. The Banias is also an incredible amount of water, as we talked before, one of the sources of the Jordan River, and the water carves this beautiful canyon through the basalt landscape, which is lava flowing out of the volcanoes in the Golan Heights, and one of the most beautiful locations to walk through. For Israelis, this is like going to a different country. The incredible amount of water, vegetation, very much similar to Tel Dan that we saw before. And of course, the highlight as you walk on this suspended trail right above the water is getting to the Banias waterfall, which is nothing compared to Niagara Falls or Iguazu Falls, but for Israelis, this is a highlight, beautiful waterfall. You can actually hear the water, feel the mist. It's a lot of fun and a very cool area to visit. Now that we've visited some of the sites that we wanted to visit that are touristic site and nature sites, let's talk about the people who put together the area of the Galilee. The Galilee has many different minorities. Some of these minorities are very interesting and very different than the Jews that live in the Galilee. The majority of the population of the Galilee, by the way, is not Jewish, about 60% not Jewish. And the Circassians are the first group I want to talk about. There's about 5,000 of them in Israel. They live in Kfar Kama and Rechania, two big villages along the border with Lebanon. They're Muslims. They come from the Stan area, the Caucasus. They had a fight with the Russians at the turn of the 18th century and were essentially running away in the 1800s. The Ottomans, who they escaped to their empire, brought them over here to the land of Israel, and they've been living here ever since. You can see the traditional garb looks very much sort of Caucasian and in the Caucasus, so very much in that way. Another group that is important to mention, which there's a few thousands of them, about 5,000 to 10,000 as well. These are the Maronite Christians. The Maronite Christians, Maronite are similar to Catholic in their beliefs, but they're a separate sect. The Maronite Christians are the main Christian denomination in Lebanon. During the establishment of the international borders after World War I, some of the villages of the Maronites were established in the state of Israel. And this man on the right, and the interview that we'll watch very shortly, his name is Shadi Khalul Risho, a good friend of mine. I visited him many times. He's a retired reserve captain in the or major in the Israeli army, served in the paratroopers. Very adamant about Israel, very supportive of being a Christian citizen of Israel. And he's going to tell us a little bit about the religion and why the Maronites are living in Israel and how they feel to be Israeli citizens.
So welcome again to visit our Aramaic community here in Jish and in Kafar Biram. We are located in the Galilee and north of Israel, very close to the Lebanese border. And as Aramaic Christian Maronite community, as Christians in Israel, as indigenous population of the Middle East, we are descendants of early Christians, of Aramaic people who spoke the language of Jesus in the Galilee in his Western dialect, and we still as well existed here since ever. As Aramaic people, we go back to 4,000 years at least, and as a Christian community, we here since Christians, as Christ started his preaching in the Galilee among Christians. And let's remind everyone, Jesus was a Jew for a Jewish family, and we inherited his teachings and we continue his way from now until the end. We count about 133,000 Christians in Israel. We belong to different denominations and churches. One of the churches that you are located now in it, and we are talking together in it,
it's beautiful.
It's the Syriac Aramaic Maronite Church of Antioch. Okay. So this church goes back about 1,700 years since the time of Saint Maroon, the founder of the church. As you see here in this image, this is Saint Maroon. He was a Syriac Aramaic monk, lived in the region of Aleppo of today, what was called Aramaic kingdoms. It has Aramaic kingdoms before, and the people were actually withdrew to the upper valleys of the Lebanon, this Aramaic population, since the Arabic Islamic conquest and occupation to the Middle East, and since then we are actually hiding or preserving our identity of Aramaic nationality and religious Christian identity in these high mountains, who protected us from this persecution, as you say today, for Christians in Iraq and Syria. So here in Israel we live in a safe side, I call it. We live in democratic Jewish state, enjoying civil rights, enjoying all other democratic values that you have in the US. This is the greatness of this country, Israel. It allows all its citizens by law the rights that they should have, without differentiation of religion, sect, race, whatever gender. Any person who lives in Israel and he's Israeli citizen, equal by law. And this is why the Christian community in Israel is thriving and prospering and enjoying safety and security. So we should say also sometimes thank you, Israel, for protecting Christians.
So Shadi Khalul Risho is, as I said, a very proud Israeli citizen. And one of the amazing things that his community has, as you can see here, he's holding an ancient prayer book written in Aramaic. Aramaic is a language that was earlier than Hebrew. Hebrew is derived from Aramaic. Very interesting group of people, and they lived originally in the ancient town of Biram. This is a synagogue from the 6th century, 500s CE or AD. Beautiful archaeological site, and it's located literally inside the village of Biram, which is the way Shadi and his community calls their village. They were displaced by the state of Israel to a town called Jish, Gush Chalav, nearby. They're working on returning to this area, and this is their church. They come from Jish, which is 3 miles away, every Sunday to pray at this church. I've been in this church several times. Very interesting place. Finally, another group of minority that lives in the Upper Galilee are the Druze. The Druze is very interesting. We should have a whole virtual tour about the Druze later on, but in really a few points, the Druze is a religion that starts in the 11th century CE, derived from Shiite Islam, and were persecuted, much like Shadi described about the Christians that were persecuted. The Druze were persecuted by the Sunni Muslims that were living around there, and withdrew to the mountains of Lebanon, Syria, the Hermon Ridge, and the Upper Galilee of Israel. So the Druze exist only in the north part of Israel. They go as far as Mount Carmel in Haifa. And the idea was to be protected in the high mountains. A lot of Druze are also in Lebanon and in Syria. That's true also for the Maronite Christians that we mentioned before. And the Druze are citizens of Israel. They serve in the army. They're required to serve in the army. The men, here you can see the religious garb of the men and the women. The women dress in blue or black with the white head covering. The men shave their, as you can see in the guy over here, they shave their head, keep their mustache, and they dress also in this way. So there are religious Druze. There are also secular Druze that look just like you and I. And the flags that you see here on the right-hand side, I chose to end with this because I think this is the Druze flag. The 6 colors, the 5 colors that you see represent the different prophets of the Druze religion. And side by side with the Israeli flag, the Druze see themselves very much similar to the Jewish people in terms of being persecuted and being a religion that is passed down from generation to generation, and feel a kinship to the state of Israel. This is true, by the way, for the Circassians and the Maronite Christians, feel a connection and a kinship with the state of Israel, and it's important for them to be part of this community where, as Shadi mentioned in his interview, there's definitely freedom of religion for all of these religions. Christians, Druze, Circassians in the state of Israel are doing much better than in the rest of the Middle East. So this was a sort of a taste of this beautiful region of the Galilee, the Upper Galilee, the Western Galilee, filled with water, some incredible places. The city of Tzfat, which is the beginning of Kabbalah. I really hope that in the future we'll be able to tour around, go back to these places. And again, one of the reasons for doing a virtual tour right now is to remind us that this beautiful region that has recently been in an area of conflict and in an area where people are not living in their houses and their kibbutzim and moshavim and in their towns, including, by the way, my family from Gesher Aziv as well. We hope and pray that this will change in the foreseeable future, and that all of you will come and visit and will be able to go back to these beautiful areas. So thank you for joining me on this virtual tour, and I hope to see you soon in Israel. B'shana ba'a b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem.